Yes, sir. Going back to back, baby. All right, let's get it. Let's get it. All right, guys. So on today's episode of the Come Up, I got a fellow infantryman who's a University of South Carolina alumni, currently serving in the 82nd Airborne, and recently just made the jump to sergeant as an E5 non-commissioned officer. And to put that cherry on the top, he is Ranger qualified as well. So, Kurth, man, welcome to the pod again, bro.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Excited to be here, dude.
Yeah, and I say again, guys, because I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I shot with Kurt twice. We recorded twice, and someone was
I
wishing
just
bad
wasn't
luck
good
on me.
enough. I just wasn't good enough, I guess. Yeah.
Someone was wishing
For the
bad luck on
record,
me, man.
I'll perform better for sure.
There we go. There we go. But yeah, guys, we're hoping third time's a charm. You know, everything happens for a reason. Something tells me this is gonna be even better than the other two for sure. So before I'm kind of gonna go ahead and go to setting expectations. I've been trying to do that the last couple of episodes. So just kind of giving you the what and the why of this episode. So what we're going to be covering is we'll first get an overview of Kurth's experience in college. From there, we'll get into his decision to join the army and why he chose enlisted versus officer. Once we get an understanding of why he joined and why he chose a specific contract that he chose, we'll see what Kurth has done in the Army thus far, such as BLC, Basic Leadership Course, Ranger School, different training events, and just insight on being a sergeant in the 82nd Airborne and having time as a team leader and a squad leader as well. So, in terms of why you should watch this video, guys, for my military people, just take Kurth as a good example of taking control of his military career and maximizing it to the best of his ability. As you'll probably hear in the military a lot, no one's going to care more about your career than you. So it's all going to be up to you at the end of the day. So Kurth getting his Ranger tab to then coming NCO, having experience with team leader, squad leader positions is all you really need to know as far as that goes. So for my CVs, man, even though you may not understand what Ranger School is, what NCO is, different lingo like that, just take it as Kurth moving up the corporate ladder in a sense, right? Just taking charge of your career and making your mark. But that's it, man. Going first, we're gonna throw some little warm up questions at you, Kurth, man. So
Appreciate that.
for sure, man.
I struggle with the curves, so I take the easy fastball.
Okay, let's go. Let's go with the first one, man. It's a little easy one, a little straight down the pipe. What's your proudest accomplishment?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be cliche from a Ranger qualified airborne soldier, but yeah, graduating Ranger School was a super meaningful moment for myself. Um, More importantly, it was celebrated with my family. My father was Ranger Tab, and then to have my mother and my father's parents there for graduation was just a really special event for me. So it was far more important to me than graduating college or high school. I That was easy for sure, but graduating Ranger School, you have to have a little bit of intestinal fortitude, as the creed goes, and it's physically demanding. Not everybody wants to do it. Not everybody that wants to do it can do it. So it was really meaningful to finish that with my family by my side. It was a very special moment.
Got you. And next one's gonna be what is something you were known for in high school or college?
Oh, that's good, man. Probably wasting a lot of time playing recreational sports I never had a chance of doing anything in my life with. Um, but I just love sports so much. Right now, I'm reading a bunch of books about baseball. And I spend so much time playing fantasy baseball, watching highlights, playing soccer and baseball recreationally, even to this day. So I spent tons of time in high school playing pickup soccer, and then also for the high school and in a club team. But yeah, spending inordinate amount of time playing recreational sports when I probably should have been studying and doing things that could have benefited my career in other ways. But just love sports so much and spent a lot of time doing that. So if I guess people when they thought about me, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's a dude that's always playing sports." So,
And what's the best advice you've received?
so one of my dad's, um, uh, well, they were similar ranks. So I'll call him a peer. Uh, when I after my dad passed away, he was like, some advice that I wish I had when I was younger and followed it was reading 30 minutes a day before I went to sleep, 30 minutes a night. And I was really young, but for whatever reason, that resonated with me. And I started reading right before I went to bed. And I credit a lot of my random geographic knowledge and various other crazy um, tidbits that I can recall to reading 30 minutes a night from when I was very young about various topics. And it's just a great habit to get into, and you become a better versed, more well-rounded person when you read widely. And that's actually something that I didn't do when I was really young. I just read like a certain genre, but then you kind of expand, and it's quite something, because that cumulative effect, that cumulative interest of acquiring all these little tidbits it becomes like a really interesting body of knowledge after a while. So that was the best advice I ever got, and I'm glad I started to follow it. So,
Yeah, I gotta pick up on that, man. I've been liking on my reading, but definitely a breath
yeah,
of fresh air when I do read.
for
Next
sure.
one, man, is gonna be, what is something you wish you knew 5 years ago?
I wish I would have known that I would decide to join the army. So I decided to join the army like probably 3.5 years ago. But if I had realized that I was going to join the army 5 years ago, then I probably would have made some different decisions in college. Maybe I would have gone to ROTC. I probably would have started focusing on my body a little bit more, as far as, in particular, running. So when I like showed up to different courses, it would have been a lot easier, especially RASP. Um, so yeah, it would have changed me in those practical ways. And then just getting your mind, um, just just like knowing that you're going into a certain career path a little bit earlier, you can just start tailoring your life so that you can maximize your abilities once you get there, I suppose. But
I
yeah,
got you.
these are some tough questions. I don't
It's
know if these are
heating up in here,
fastballs yet.
man.
These aren't fastballs. I didn't take my hat off. I'm sweating already. But yeah, these are good.
um, I'm gonna hit you with two more. I'm gonna hit you with two
Okay.
more. I'm gonna choose these two. I had a couple more, but I want to choose these two.
All right.
Rangers or special forces?
Oh, 100% Ranger. Ranger Regiment is the way that I'm taking this question. Yeah, Ranger Regiment is an incredible organization. I initially signed up to the Army so I could, be a part of the Ranger Regiment. Unfortunately, didn't make it, but I have nothing but incredible respect for those dudes. Absolute studs, and I think they treat uh, their profession the right way. Whereas I think there are a lot of great Green Berets out there, but from my limited experience just hearing anecdotes, I think they can get a little high on their own supply, literally in some cases, because some groups have gotten caught, smuggling drugs and stuff. But yeah, they're just a little bit too overconfident for what their performance has been. Whereas Ranger Regiment, they're the ones who really are the quiet professionals who perform at an absolutely insane level. And you saw throughout GWAT, they became used more and more often because of their professionalism and their expertise in direct action raids. So yeah, Ranger Regiment 100%.
Yeah, and you always hear good things like across the board from guys who've worked alongside Ranger Regiment. Those guys
Yeah,
are just hard charging, just ready to get
mm-hmm.
after it kind of guys.
Does.
So RLTW, man, hashtag RLTW. If you know,
That's
you
right.
know. Last one, Kurt, man, before we kind of start getting into your story, just kind of your evolution throughout life, time in the army,
Mm.
etc. If you had to write a book about yourself, what would it be called, and what would it be about?
Dude, that's a great question. So I've actually kind of thought about um, writing a book before, not because I think I have anything super important to say, but because my father's life is just something that I think is amazing, and it's a story that needs to be told and remembered. So maybe you want to get into this later, but my father died when I was 5 in an IED in Iraq, and his commitment to a cause and serving and ultimately paying the tremendous sacrifice as he did. Um, that's a story that should be remembered. And I think it would like my decision to join after him would also be in that same book, but just how his death, affected me and my decision and the rest of my life. And then ultimately it would be a story about America and how generation after generation is served sacrificially and for the good of the country. Whereas I mean he could have definitely had a much more remunerative profession and something that is more esteemed. But chose to do something else because he was a patriotic dude, and yeah, I would have to be it would have to be about him. And then my mom is fantastic as well, so it would be about my parents, just being amazing, and then I'd say a little bit about how their life affected me and how I hope to live up to their incredible legacy. But yeah.
Yeah, man, of course. And I honestly, you should definitely do that for sure. I would definitely get a copy of that.
Yeah,
Um,
you buy it? Thank you, thank you, thank you. I got one
yeah,
sale for sure.
there we go. First come, first serve, baby. But
That's
yeah,
it.
man, like you said, like I think that's important, and that's exactly why like I like to do these podcasts, you know what I mean? Because it's something that can always be reviewed, people can always look back on. I think I don't think once you're gone and you're off to the next afterlife, you should just be forgotten about. Like on Memorial Day, I was on this SOCOM archives page on Instagram, and it was awesome because they were just sharing a bunch of killed in action, all these things, like just remembering all their loved ones, which is
Mhm,
important. You know what I mean? Like we shouldn't just be just numbers. And
mhm.
in the grand scheme of things, like unfortunately, that's kind of what it is. But that's across the board. That's not just military. But I'm glad like things are being different to where I feel like society's kind of changing that. We're taking charge. We're being more vocal about things, etc. So, anyways, yeah, I would definitely do that, bro. But let's go ahead and get into that childhood growing up, just what it was like. So let's of course start with the basics, just being, when and where you were born and how many siblings you had.
Sure. So I was born in Anderson, South Carolina in 1998, August 29th. And every year since then, my birthday has been August 29th. But so grew up with a brother 6 years younger than me. Like I said, my dad died when I was 5. Mom raised me. I had a stepdad for a period of time. Unfortunately, wasn't the best guy, and my mom ended up divorcing him. But had a great upbringing. Like my mom is an incredible woman. Grandparents on both sides were incredibly supportive. Um, and yeah, I would say I had beside the crazy fact of your father dying in war. Like I had a rather normal American upbringing. Like I would say single families or single parent homes are quite common now. And although they have like a real negative connotation, bad things can happen in those homes. Like that's uh, like statistically, there's bad outcomes in single parent homes, but mine was fantastic. And again, I just credit that to my mom, just being an incredible woman and a great mother. But yeah, so nothing crazy happened. Like we stayed in the upstate of South Carolina, went to school there. Does that answer your question? You want me to get more specific about any other parts of my
Yeah, man.
young life?
Feel free to elaborate as much as you want. But that was answering the question. But I guess to kind of go more into your father,
Sure, sure,
going back
sure.
to everything. If you could just kind of give us kind of a little bit of his backstory, how he even
Yeah,
got into the army, etc.
yeah, absolutely. So my understanding is that he always wanted to go to a service academy. First, it was the Naval Academy, and then he ended up visiting West Point and loved it and decided to go there and ended up graduating from West Point in 1995, commissioned as an infantry lieutenant, went to IBOLIC, went to Ranger School, and then came to the 82nd um, and started serving the exact same company that I'm in today. So BNO 2505 PIR. Um, and so did the normal like infantry PL route, got tabbed and did his PL time and XO time in 2P, then went to captain's career course, got orders to first ID, and they had a brigade, or maybe it was just a battalion out in Germany, and he got orders there. And so he did a couple deployments in Kosovo, one or two, I want to say, and then was back in Schweinfurt, Germany, eventually deploying from there with first ID as a company commander. And yeah, after being in theater for 6 days, was hit by an IED, and both he and his driver died in the IED blast. Um, and that was March of 2004. So March 13th.
Man, I can only imagine, dude, like how your mother felt. Like
Yeah,
you're very young. You're really not able
right.
to recollect. I always have trouble saying that word. Basically, remember some of
Yeah.
these events. But I'm pretty sure that's how it goes, right? Like if a loved one dies, they show up at the time they would show up at your doorstep, right? Or they would give you a call. Like how does that work?
Yeah, yeah. Interestingly enough, I didn't know this at the time, but they just renamed Fort Benning Fort Moore, and it's Hal Moore and then his wife, and I don't know her first name, but she was the one. Hal Moore's wife was the one who kind of changed how casualties families were notified. So previously, I guess it had been a telegram way back in the day, and then it became a phone call, and then I mean that's not very personal at all, and I can only imagine, a family member getting a call about their loved one dying. So then they switched it to where service members will come in uniform to next of kin and tell them what happened. And so yeah, I remember the day when a sedan rolled up to our house. I was playing basketball with my babysitter, and that person knew what was going on, told me to go inside. They talked to the babysitter, and yeah, I don't know what was said because I was inside. But then we went over to where my mom was working. I believe it was a Saturday, and she's an attorney. She was working on a Saturday, and they told her, and then she ended up coming out and telling me. But pretty, I mean, she took it well enough to tell me, but I mean, of course, it devastated her. That was the only man she ever loved, and I know my grandparents probably were devastated as well. But I think it is better, coming from a uniformed service member rather than a phone call, of course. But yeah, like you said, I was only 5 years old, and at least me, maybe there's some other 5 year olds that are incredibly precocious and understand death, but I was not sentient in the sense that I understood life and death. And I remember telling my mom on the way out of this high school gymnasium in Columbus, Wisconsin, and we were going to the burial. And I was like, I looked at my mom and I was like, my dad's just sleeping right now. I just didn't understand the concept of death and the fact that he was never coming back. And I remember her telling me, this is one of my most vivid memories from that age. And she was like, no, he's not coming back. Like he's dead. And yeah, that's about all I can remember from that time period. I have a few bits and pieces of my father that I remember, different anecdotes and memories that unfortunately have faded over time. Um, but like I said, he was stationed in Germany from when I was like 3 to 5, and so as I was coming to in my mind, he was away for a huge chunk of it. But my aunt got married, I think the Christmas before he died, so a few months before he died, and he was able to get leave to come back for that. And I remember that wedding pretty well, and remember hanging out with him then. My grandpa had just gotten a black lab puppy. I remember going to my grandparents' house with my dad and meeting that black lab puppy. So um, yeah, that's a sweet memory that I have that I'll cherish.
And is this gravesite in Fayetteville, or is it where you were born?
No, it's in Columbus, Wisconsin. So where he was born, where my grandparents currently reside, where the Kurth family has been for a very long period of time. So his gravestone's up there with the rest of the family.
Do you visit it, like, were you visiting it often, or like, is it just kind of
Yeah,
like,
yeah. When I grew up, my grandparents would take me there. My mom really finds it meaningful to go to the gravesite and just be there. Um, I find it less meaningful. Like I think of my dad often, very often, every day, but I don't really have that emotion that some people get when they actually go to the gravesite. Um, but yeah, a lot of people will come up and visit the gravesite. Look at the stone, leave a flower or a bottle cap or a coin. People will leave all kinds of things, things that are meaningful to them and were meaningful to him, I suppose. But yeah, I'll go up there occasionally, like when my grandparents want to go, or if my mom's in town. Usually, she'll go just by herself because she knows it's just not something that I really find meaning in. But yeah, it's a gravestone, and since you brought it up, just the gravesite, my father's epitaph is as of his use May 1995, like duty honor country, blah blah blah. And then what always stood out to me from a very young age, it says father of John Alexander. And I'm John Alexander, obviously, and that just hit me. I don't know at what age it did, but I was like, I am my father's legacy, and I can't just be okay. Like I have to be really good at whatever I choose to do because I'm not only living for myself. I'm, his the one thing on earth that was his and that he made, and so yeah, it kind of it's not like a yoke that I carry or an incredible burden, but it's a more of a motivator and something that I think about often, and it makes me strive to be the best at whatever I do. So yeah,
yeah, and it's he definitely was looking after you during Ranger School because you made it. We'll get into it later, but
yeah,
you didn't really. You were fortunate not to have recycles, or if you did it, I think you did one time, but
yep,
for the
recycled
most
board.
part, yeah, one time. But look, you got lucky in that sense. I just kept it off with the growing up with this, with your father gone, and then you said your stepfather, that was with your mother at the time,
Hmm.
obviously was no good. Who were
Hmm.
your father mentors, I guess you could say, growing up?
Yeah, yeah. So I went to a really small Christian school, and like I'd already mentioned, I had really good grandparents. So my grandfathers kind of filled that role, And then, my uncle, career enlisted in the infantry. I saw him semi-regularly, and I always looked up to him. But then, as far as like an everyday mentor, I had some fantastic male role models at school as teachers, and they're the um, just the prime example of what like a sacrificial uh, professional looks like. And it's kind of like weird to call a teacher a professional, but that of course is their profession. And at this Christian school, it's not like some of them where they get paid a lot of money and it has like a really high tuition. And these people are not making a lot of money, but they choose a career of service, getting paid very little to do something that's incredibly important. So yeah, Mr. McAdams, Mr. Hallberg are two that come to mind right now, just being amazing men and mentors. Um, and yeah, I credit Hampton Park Christian School with a lot of. I mean, I can't call my life a success so far, like yet. But I think I'm a halfway decent dude and have been semi-successful at what I've done. And yeah, I'd say with my mom, with those mentors, like it would be hard to go wrong because they were so good.
Yeah, it's definitely safe to say you're at least a cut above the rest. Most definitely, just with everything you've accomplished, man. And
Unfortunately, I was interviewed after Ranger School and I used that little saying cut above just because it came to mind. And it really smacks of condescension towards everybody that doesn't have a Ranger tab. And I hate that I use that. And now people will like kind of make fun of me for saying cut above. And of course, I didn't mean it to be like thumping my own chest, but you get kind of indoctrinated when you're at Ranger School and you definitely think you're a cut above. But yeah, so it's funny that you use that exact term.
I can see the fun and game just poking at each other with that. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you're just poking, looking at
Oh,
you
you
just
think
pointing at
you're
your
cut above,
tab and
huh?
stuff.
Yeah.
But cool, man. Let's jump forward to your time at South Carolina. Let's kind of review that. So I do want to start with after graduating high school. Did you already have a concrete plan as far as knowing that college you're going to go to and a
Yeah.
degree program you wanted?
Yeah. So my mom went to undergrad and law school at USC and not Southern California. This is South Carolina. And I'm going to call it USC. Um, but yeah, they have a great international business program. And I remember seeing billboards like #1 international business program all the time driving down the interstate to South Carolina. And since I was a huge Gamecock fan because my mom went there and I had gone to a bunch of baseball and basketball and football games, that was the only place I wanted to go to. And it nested well with my interests in business because I've always been interested in finance, which is kind of a weird thing, but I got interested in it when I was really young and I'd watch Bloomberg and CNBC and whatever finance shows they had on. I just really enjoyed it. And so yeah, that piqued my interest when I saw those billboards, and I basically made my mind up when I was really young that I wanted to go there and pursue that degree, and got in. It was the only school I applied to. Looking back, that was a pretty stupid decision because I was a crazy procrastinator. Didn't put in my I didn't apply until I was really long in the process. I think it was the due date was December 31st, and I probably did it on December 31st. And I didn't have a fallback or safety school at all. Like my grades were fine; they're definitely good enough to get in South Carolina, but still, like they had fumbled the paperwork in some way. I had no plan B. But yeah, got to South Carolina, spent a year just taking gen ed business courses, and then I applied to the international business program because you had to apply to it if you weren't in the honors college, and had a 4.0 and was admitted. Then I had to choose a language, so I chose Spanish, and then I had to choose a functional major, and I chose finance. So yeah, I ended up graduating in May of 2020 with a degree in international business and finance with a minor in Spanish. But if you speak Spanish, Ryan, I don't speak Spanish anymore, so please don't hit me with anything. Um, yeah, so that was my college life. Um,
Was getting
Nothing
used to
crazy happened.
college was college life like something you had to get used to, just like kind of with a little bit more leniency? You had to really be on top of yourself, or it was just like easy come, easy go for you?
Yeah, that was the first time I'd really buckled down and focused on academics. And I had a good group of friends. Like I lived on this 18 floor, seems like a skyscraper when I first got there, but it's this 18 floor freshman dorm called South Tower at University of South Carolina. And I was on floor 16, I want to say. And I had a really good group of guys that were on that floor with me and did a bunch of extracurricular stuff with them. Played a lot of basketball my freshman year, um, and focused on grades. So it wasn't a hard transition because I think I had my priorities straight, and it was a much bigger school certainly than what I had been used to. I graduated with 26 or 27 people from high school, and then going to the state's largest public school, public college, um, is a difference in that regard. But it didn't feel like overwhelming at all.
Any crazy college stories that you have that
Dude,
you're able to share?
I was so laid back and low key in college. I'm not even joking when I say I did not go to one party. Um, I was just like what your mom and dad want you to be when you go to college. I was, dude. And I kind of regret it to a certain degree in the sense that I don't have, all these crazy stories and experiences that other people had in college. I mean, really, it's not meaningful at the end of the day if you go on these crazy bacchanalias and do a bunch of wild stuff. I'm glad I didn't do that. But yeah, I have basically no crazy stories to share at all. Um, I guess the most interesting thing is that I was playing basketball my freshman year, and one of the coaches for the women's team came in and to our gymnasium. We were just playing recreationally, and like, hey, they watched us play for a little while, and he's like, hey, do you want to be a practice player for the women's team? And he told me about how I'd get to sign up for classes early, how I'd get like some gear, um, tickets to all the games, like all the sporting events, so football, baseball, etc. And I was like, yeah, because at the time I was really missing that competitive environment, being on a team. I thought it'd be really fun to play in the Coliseum because that's where they have the practice facilities, and then Colonial Life Arena where they play the games and practice sometimes. Um, and so I did that. And then my freshman year, we won the national championship. The girls team won the national championship, and so I have a ring with my name engraved on it, national champion in women's basketball. But when girls ask, I tell them I'm just a national champion, and they're none the wiser. I can say I can maybe like playoff baseball, definitely not football or basketball to D1 level, but yeah,
Definitely a unique opportunity. But this kind
yeah.
of leads us now to joining the army and going back to why you chose this route, which I know your
Mm-hmm.
father had some inspiration with this. But um, considering you could have leveraged your degree to find a job in the civilian side, and then decide, okay, well, this isn't fulfilling enough. Now I feel compelled to want to go serve. Why didn't you just go that route?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I definitely was in the South Carolina has like a pipeline to investment banking, consulting type jobs, but you have to go to this finance scholars program. And I applied to it, and I thought for sure I was going to get in. I still had a 4.0 this time. This is after my sophomore year, I want to say. Oh, maybe I did have 4.0, but it was awfully close. Um, so I had a very competitive GPA. A couple of my friends had already been admitted to it, and they had a lower GPA. And you had an interview with a professor, you had an interview with an alum. And those interviews, I thought, or the interview with the professor went super well. And I thought for sure I'd get in there. Um, and then I had the interview with the alum, and he was, I remember this very well. He was coming back from work in New York City, and I can't remember where he worked. It was at some sort of, yeah, I can't even remember actually. But he was coming back from work, and the phone sounded like it was going black. You couldn't hear anything. You couldn't hear static. It sounded like it was a vacuum. It was very strange. And I was like, multiple times in the conversation, I said to him, hey, are you still there? And it completely interrupted the flow. And I think maybe I sounded flustered and was trying to bide time so I could come in with an answer. I don't know what he thought, but it evidently did not go well in his mind. And I ended up not making the finance scholars. So because of that, I was thinking to myself, this is the summer between my sophomore and junior year. Like, well, what can I do? Um, like I still could do investment banking probably. I need to get an internship this summer, next summer, continue to do well academically, and then apply to a bunch of places. But it would have been a harder route than just doing finance scholars. And it caused me to think, what do I want my life to be like? And I had thought many times over the years that I wanted to serve in some capacity, but had not pulled the trigger. When I was applying to colleges, my mom had broached the idea of going to West Point, and I was against it at the time. My only visit to West Point was when I was really young, and it was cold and wet, and they had the Gothic architecture, and it was really quite a turnoff at the time. I think subconsciously that's what I'm reading it as now. I was like a 5, 6 year old, and I was at this crazy spooky place. So I didn't want to go to West Point. Decided I want to go to South Carolina. Fast forward between sophomore and junior year, and I was like, I think I do want to join the Army because I had my father and my uncle as, my idols growing up, both dudes who served. My uncle, I think I mentioned already, career enlisted infantry, and then my dad was an 11 Alpha, um, who served 8-9 years before he died. So decided to pull the trigger and make the decision to enlist. Well, at the time, I hadn't decided to enlist quite yet, but decided I want to join the Army. So actually, when fall rolled around my junior year, I went and talked to the lieutenant colonel who was in charge of the ROTC program. And he said I would have to change my major from international business to something else because the international business major required you to study abroad for a semester. And I didn't want to change my major. So I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to enlist when I get out. So plan was to graduate in December of 2019. And then between my junior and senior years of college, this is a summer after what I was just discussing about, the decision that I made was in the summer of 2018, I want to say. And then summer of 2019, or no, excuse me, summer of 2017 is when I made the decision. Summer of 2018, I tore my ACL and had to push back graduation. Well, I didn't need to push back graduation, but I knew I was going to be in therapy this whole time, so I wouldn't be able to join anyways. So moved back graduation a semester. So I just graduated in the normal 4 and worked on, healing up and getting ready to join. And yeah, eventually joined, as you know.
What gravitated you towards the option 40, which once again is a guaranteed slot to RASP, Ranger
Yeah.
Assessment Selection Program, to hopefully join the Ranger Regiment? What gravitated you towards that?
Yeah, I think the difference, I was deciding between an 18 X-ray contract and option 40. And the main decision point was the X-ray. If they do get selected, and the selecting or the rate of selection is pretty low. I'm not sure what it is off my dome, off the head, but it's not great. And then option 40, you could sign up for a year less because at the time I didn't know if I wanted just to do, turned out to be 4.5 years and then commission, or I didn't know what it looked like, so I wanted to leave myself a little bit of wiggle room and not commit for 5.5 when I could commit for 4.5. So ended up going with option 40. And I do like Ranger Regiment as an organization and institution better than Green Berets and the different groups. There are some groups and again some teams that are really solid, but by and large, I think you're getting a better product out of Ranger Regiment. It's just a more professional organization. And it's definitely better if you want to then commission because you're doing it's the big army. Like you have a big army mission set to a certain extent. Like you're still doing the orders process. You're still like getting orders from higher, whereas Green Berets are kind of working by with and through doing, unconventional warfare, all that stuff. And Ranger Regiment still is doing something that has transferability to the big army. So if you're going to enlist in regiment, serve time there, then you commission, you'll have a real good foundation in what needs to be done. And I realize now that my answer made it sound like regiment's just like a little bit better than big army. Obviously, it's significantly better in a lot of ways, and it is special operations. But yeah, there is more carryover from regiment to the big army than Green Berets to the big army.
Yeah, and I think the other like cool thing too about Regiment, specifically like option 40, like if you go in basically off the street, is there's like tons of MOSs. So you don't like most people think, oh, infantry, but you could be a mechanic, you could be intel, you could be a truck driver in the Ranger Regiment. So that's the other beauty about it. You can go and really get skilled at your craft, whatever it is that you choose to do. So that's the other like beauty thing about Ranger Regiment. So you
Yeah.
choose your contract, like get your ship date. I would bring up 38G, but I'd rather just go straight to OSUT, to be honest.
Sure.
So what better way than, of course, once again, the first 100 yards. So just kind of tell us in your thoughts what that is and what you remember of that.
Yeah, my uncle was a drill sergeant, and he explained what he used to do to the candidates or to whatever they call it as trainees, I think. And what he said he did was not even close to what we got once we got there. It was kind of underwhelming. We got off the bus and they were yelling at us a little bit. We did the preparatory drill. So, you do the bend and reach and a bunch of exercises from the 1930s, 1940s. And then we started the first 100 yards. And I remember it was a pretty hot and sticky day, and I was pretty tired after the end of it. but we weren't getting, absolutely beat into the ground. But, they were starting their indoctrination, red phase, part of OSUT. So it wasn't necessarily fun, but it wasn't as bad as I was expecting, um, after what I heard from my uncle. But I ended up liking OSUT, honestly. There were times of it that were pretty annoying, but by and large, it was not too bad.
Got you. Yeah, and actually, when we went in, it was extended from 14 to 22 weeks.
Has it gone back down now?
No. It's still 22.
Okay. Okay.
As far as
Okay.
I'm concerned, I'm not too sure, but I
Yeah.
believe it's still 22. They should just put it at 14 just because of the dead space that we had, honestly.
Tons of it. Yeah.
But yeah. So they have all those different phases, and then as you get along in the phases, you get more privileges, introduced to
Mhm.
more infantry tasks, etc. But red phase is one of the phases that sticks out to me in terms of culture shock that people
Yeah.
refer to. Um, did you feel the same, or what phase did you get that kind of feeling, if you even got that feeling?
No, it wasn't too bad. I think I knew what to expect pretty well because talking to my uncle, um, that was the biggest thing. I knew it was not going to be fun, and you're going to be treated like a private because we all were. Um, yeah, it never. There were times that I didn't enjoy, but I knew that it was just temporary. And once I got to my unit, it would be better. So nothing really stands out as a super bad or unenjoyable phase in OSUT. Um, yeah.
Got you. And what phase do you feel, if you can remember phase or just drills, whatever the
Mm.
case may be, uh, really helped you set you up for success with going into your unit?
Yeah, so I think the best week for me and the week that's probably the most important is sticks. So you're learning how to think as an infantryman. I hope you're able to be put in a leadership position where you can lead some of your fellow soldiers. And again, sticks for people that don't know is situational training exercise. So you're doing a lot of very basic battle drills. This is the first time you're doing them, and it's a lot of fun, and you can learn a lot. And that's basically what you do when you get to your unit. You're doing a lot of battle drills. Sure, you're doing some live fires that are a little more advanced than what we did in OSUT, but the sticks lanes in our OSUT class, our drill sergeants, I thought did a really good job putting them on. Um, and I learned a lot. So when I got to my unit here, I had a really good grounding in the battle drills. Of course, I was doing like a little bit of studying on my own, but I'd say the vast majority of why I was pretty solid when I got here was because the drill sergeants did a really good job with the 20 boards and then putting us through reps. So I think the sticks week during OSUT was the most memorable and benefited me the most once I got to my unit.
Yeah. And how would you describe, like, what's your opinion on the whole like leadership thing? Where people get designated platoon sergeant, team leaders, etc.
Yeah, so we've talked about this before, but I was a platoon sergeant. It's kind of a weird thing. Like they had us take a vote, and you would write on the piece of paper top three, bottom three. And unfortunately, looking back at it, I was well liked at the beginning of OSUT, and I had a lot of number one votes apparently, and I was made the platoon sergeant. And I was a platoon sergeant until like week 12 or week 13. So that was the most unenjoyable part of OSUT was being in that leadership position because it's not redeeming at all. There's no redeeming element to a leadership position in OSUT. Maybe I got like a little free chicken here and there and learned a thing or two, but most of it you're getting directives from the drill sergeant and you're trying to herd cats. And you don't have an iron fist that you can rule with. You just have to try to get people on your side using various means. But you can't hold the rod over them saying, "Oh, I'm going to smoke you unless you do this." You just kind of have to convince them to, take one for the team, go on this detail. Um, and it ended up being me and like 7 or 8 other dudes doing the vast majority of the work, unfortunately. So it was just not a very fun time for me. And I probably let it get to me a little bit too much. I was not a perfect leader by any means during that. And it's not an understatement to say that I hated it and was very glad when I was no longer the platoon sergeant. So I understand why they do it. You have to have some sort of leadership roles. But my word, it was not fun unless we were in the field. And then I enjoyed being the platoon sergeant. But yeah, when we were in garrison, it was nothing but a headache.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on your drill sergeants? Drill Sergeant Burke, hands down, funniest drill sergeant.
Yeah,
kind of the
yeah, I
cycle.
100%, man. He was so funny, and I thought he was a very good NCO. From what I could tell, and I have a platoon sergeant right now, my platoon sergeant who is incredibly competent and very good at what he does, and Jill Sergeant Burke was a lot like that. Um, they're two very different people, but both in their same ways. I think they could take the company and run it by themselves. And I remember him, he was, I don't know if he was the most senior drill sergeant, but he definitely could take the reins and get stuff done. Yeah, incredibly funny. I thought like on a number of occasions, like I need to find him and just message him. Like I think he'd get a kick out of knowing that I graduated Ranger School. I don't, maybe he wouldn't care at all, but I do from time to time think about him and wonder what he's up to right now because his drill sergeant time is definitely over at this point, and I wonder what he's doing. And I'd love to cross paths at some point. If we go to a school together, like I think that'd be so funny. We had another drill sergeant Callis, um, who was super into rifle marksmanship and was very good at it. A great teacher. Again, I think we were really blessed by the teachers that we had, by the drill sergeants that we had. They were really good teachers and seemed to care a lot. Um, and then yeah, drill sergeant Anderson, drill sergeant Woods, who were a little bit less noteworthy because they just didn't have the same uh, wild characters that they weren't the same wild characters that Jill Sergeant Burke and Jill Sergeant Cowles were, more understated in their demeanor. But yeah, I thought we had a great group of drill sergeants, and I'd love to see them at some point. Um, down the line, I think it would be funny.
Yeah, Drill Sergeant Woods is definitely someone I would never want to cross paths with. Absolutely hated Drill Sergeant Woods.
Nice.
But I definitely wish I definitely hope I'll come across some of my drill sergeants. I actually wish I could come across Captain hey, what was his name? Who was the captain? The
Captain,
range
young Captain Roberts, huh?
Captain Roberts. That
Yeah, he
guy
was
was
the
yeah,
yeah,
he
he
was
was getting out,
absolutely
unfortunately. He seemed like
really
a great dude. Like I wish he would have stayed in. Yeah,
what?
if you're a commander at an OSUT company, like there might be exceptions to this, but it's probably because you either don't have a tab or you haven't performed well your previous job or you're getting out. And that was the case with him. He was in third bat. Like obviously he was a stud, but he was getting out. And so they're like, okay, you're gonna be an OSUT commander. And it might have been something that he requested because his family had already been at Benning because he was in third bat. And he was probably like, hey, let me serve out the remainder of my time as an OSIT commanding officer. And I think that's
But he
probably
was
what happened.
tabbed, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Tab,
okay.
3rd Battalion scroll, stud for sure.
Yeah, he was absolutely incredible. Every time I asked him a question, um, he was always super responsive, man. I mean, the guy was incredible. I remember one time, dude, I forgot what we were doing. We were doing some kind of detail, and I had told him I love Rangers and stuff like that. And I was like, maybe one day I'll try out for them, you know what I mean? And I remember I go in there and he like I was nervous, right? Because it's the CEO. I'm like, oh crap. So I get attention, bro, and I'm like, oh fuck, like I'm nervous, dude. And he's like, hey man, you still thinking about going to RAS? And I'm like, I'm National Guard, sir. He's like, oh,
Mm.
okay. But he was awesome, man. I
He
mean,
brought
I
you
don't
into the office?
he didn't bring me into the office. It was we were doing some detail. I forgot what we were doing. We
Oh,
were bringing
okay.
stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we were
Mhm.
bringing some stuff to them for some kind of count or something like that. But I
Okay.
totally I don't remember honestly. But yeah,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, if you ever do come across this, please contact me because you were
Yeah,
freaking
we'll
awesome.
do. Yeah.
But yeah, man. That's OSA in the nutshell for you. I guess we'll finish off. You know how like overall, how would you describe your OSA experience?
Yeah, it was good. I learned a lot. You have to go through something like that where you're indoctrinated into the Army's way of doing things and you learn the very basics, rifle marksmanship, platoon level battle drills, team live fires. All those things are really important. You need to know how to do those before you get your unit. I think it could be a little bit more advanced. I understand that they're having to train to the lowest common denominator, but I think if they hold us all to a higher standard, we'd probably be able to rise to that. Um, as far as fitness goes, I think they did a good job with PT. I'm They're way more consistent with PT there than here in the 82nd. Like we were doing PT every single day. Um, so I think that was good. They did a solid job there. They probably could have shammed out of it a little bit more if they wanted to, but they were always pretty serious about it. And like you said, it probably could be a little bit shorter, but by and large, I think OSA was good. As for what it is. It's nothing incredibly exciting, but you got to indoctrinate kids somehow, and it's a decent way of doing it.
Yeah, it's true. So you complete OSUT, and now you move on to what you really signed up for, which is the option 40 going to pre-RAS and then hopefully RAS, but we'll get
Hmm.
into that. So on the bus ride to pre-RAS, going to the barracks, what's kind of going through your mind? What's the mindset? Is it excitement?
Yeah,
Thoughts of I'm gonna crush the scores. What was the mindset?
yeah, I was pretty excited, man. Like I've always already talked about, I think regiment's fantastic, and I wish I had made it. But yeah, going on the bus to the barracks, very excited. A little bit of anxiousness in the sense that I know that I'm going to be graded as soon as I get there. Or that was my idea of it. I thought the selection process began immediately, essentially. Um, Once we got there, you do like a little bag drag where you have everything you're issued from OSUT with you, and you're carrying it. And I think you don't have a rucksack at that point in time because you'd already turned that in when you completed OSUT. So you had, I think, maybe a 3-day ruck in 2 duffel bags, and you're carrying all that stuff. You get to the rocks, and then you start in processing paperwork, a lot of paperwork, and you do a bag dump. And we got smoked a little bit, but it was nothing crazy. Other people have gone through much worse on their first day. But the main feeling was excitement. Like you said, this is what I had signed up to do. Couldn't wait to get after it. So
What's the in processing like? What are you doing for in processing?
so you like I said, you do the bag drag, you get set up on the rocks, and then they just give you a bunch of forms. I can't remember what they were specifically, but you just fill out that paperwork. Then you're a part of Pre-Rasp. You're part of that formation, and then eventually you take your bags upstairs, kind of get settled in, and then you join the rest of the class. And then the day after that, the next day, we had a PT test that weeded out half of our dudes from OSA. I think I went with 12, and then 6 were cut that next day. And then we had a really big class at that point in time. And I want to say probably nearly 100 dudes got dropped.
Dang, for
And
real?
yeah, yeah.
Jesus.
And it wasn't a class up PT test. It was a PT test that they do between cycles to kind of weed people out that have just gotten there. And then people that maybe have been a pre-RAS for a long time who haven't improved or have kind of maybe are injured even. And they're just getting those guys out of the pool. Um, So yeah, that's what that PT test was for. But yeah, there's a really high attrition rate in pre-RAS for sure.
Were they pretty strict on form? Like, I know push-ups is like one of the ones for sure.
At Ranger School, they're incredibly strict on push-up form, but at RAS, it's really grader dependent. So yeah, as we'll probably get to, that was eventually my undoing. But my first 3 PT tests, yeah, push-ups were fine. I think I was graded pretty fairly. But yeah, the
Okay.
last one I definitely had qualms with.
What was the brief like for rules? Because I know they can also be strict on that with no phones, smoking. What were the briefs like
Yeah.
for that?
During business hours, duty hours, excuse me. I knew business hours wasn't the right term. But yeah, during duty hours, you couldn't have your phone on you. You weren't supposed to go upstairs into the barracks and check it. So just to add a little bit of context, during the day, you're outside on the rocks the entire day. You run down. So you do PT in the morning, come back up to the barracks, shower, change into your OCPs, go down, stand on the rocks until it's time for breakfast, do your Ranger Creed 6 chin ups, and you run to the DFAC, which is probably maybe a third of a mile away at most. You get your food, then you run back to the rocks, eat there, throw your trash away, stand in the rocks till lunch, and repeat the process until dinner. Or sometimes we get released before dinner, but it's basically like that, or that's how it was when I was there. Um, I think they used to have classes. They did different land nav classes, rug classes, but I think they did away with that. Maybe during COVID or something. That might have been one of the byproducts of COVID. And even though I got there well after COVID was kind of done in the army because all of us had been vaccinated at that point, um, they weren't letting people go to RASP if they weren't vaccinated. I'm pretty sure. But
How were the
yeah. So
cadre? Were they pretty chill, lax? What was the what? How were they like?
yeah, they're mostly pretty chill, but this is the nature of a lot of selection processes and even ranger school. When cadre get around other cadre, they kind of feed off of each other. And what is usually a chill cadre among the candidates becomes a monster when he's with his buddy. And NCOs do it in the big army too. They want to one up each other. Like they want to smoke their Joes, or they just want to smoke some random private from a different company. and it's just silly. Like it's stupid, but yeah, by and large, they were good dudes, good at PT, and would answer questions when you asked. They were respectful of lowly privates, which was nice. They didn't lord their deployments and higher rank over us, which they definitely probably could do and other people would do. But yeah, they were pretty professional in that regard.
Okay. So was a typical day just a lot of like PT since there wasn't much land navigation, all that stuff? Like, what was that typically your day for you?
Yeah, in the morning you do a PT session that's usually pretty hard. Sometimes it was easy. Sometimes we did random Tabatas that were really easy. Other times we went on pretty difficult runs and ruck runs. Um, and then sometimes we would do two a days where we would do a PT session in the morning and then do some sort of Tabata or other Metcon like workout in the afternoon. So one time we even did sprints. We went over to the field of crossing. It's called Peden Field across from the footprint, and we did sprints. Like I have no idea why, but we did. And it was very hot that day, as I recall. So yeah, it was a lot of PT, but more than anything, it was just standing around on the rocks, biding your time until a class of PT test came.
Got you. So walk us through now, like ultimately why you did get dropped.
Yeah, so it was my fourth PT test. Um, I already mentioned the first one. It was between classes, so it wasn't a class of PT test. Passed that one. The second one, which was a class up PT test, I passed, exceeded. So I think they have Army standards, class up standards, and Ranger standards. And so I exceeded Ranger standards on that one across the board, I think. Push ups, sit ups, and chin ups. I might have, and 2 mile. I might have like not exceeded Ranger standards on one of the categories, but either way, like I definitely exceeded class up standards on all of those. And unfortunately, I'd been flagged on my psych exam for some like really strange stuff. I don't have any sort of record. I thought it was really bizarre that I got flagged, and a bunch of people got flagged, and they're kind of confused as to why they got flagged. And I think looking back on it, they might have needed numbers, and so they just randomly picked a bunch of people to flag. I don't know. Some people that got flagged were eventually kicked out for various reasons, but for me, I really don't think I should have been flagged. I don't know why I was flagged. Suffice it to say, get flagged. Um, am not eligible to class up during that PT test. Then a couple weeks later, I was interviewed because of my psych flag. There was interview went great. They're like, okay, you're fine to class up next time. Take the between the classes PT test again. So this is my third one. Again, exceed Ranger standards. And then finally, probably 10 weeks after I first got there, my second class of PT test rolled around and I failed push-ups. And I didn't realize I failed push-ups until we got back to the rocks after the PT test. So after I've done push-ups, sit-ups, chin-ups, and the 2 mile. So I passed everything to my knowledge. I remember the grader telling me my score, and I was like, sweet, like not what I wanted. He definitely didn't cancel my push-ups, but good enough to class up. And yeah, they called my name out on the roster to go to the formation that failed class up standards because there's a formation that failed Army standards and class up standards, and then the group that was classing up. And yeah, so I failed class up standards, and I'd been there. Yeah, there's like a one strike policy. If you fail class up standards once, you get to stay. But if you've been there for more than one, if it's your first PT test, you can fail. But if it's anything after your first, you can't fail. Um, so yeah, failed push-ups. I mean, I didn't agree with what happened. Like, I tried to argue my case down in the little Pre-Rasp basement where the cadre resided, and they were having none of it. So, unfortunately, was not able to get a retest or anything like that. So, went to transitions at Rasp or Pre-Rasp, whatever you want to call it, and eventually got orders to go to Airborne School.
Okay. And you actually had a fight for that, right? You actually had a fight to get to the, or he was like, okay, this is what the most I can do for you. I can help you get to the.
Yeah. So I was trying to get that retest, and the cadre were not letting me get it. So I was like, okay, well, I hate to do this, but I'm going to try to use open door policy, talk to the first sergeant or commander about getting a retest. Because the way I was reading the blue book and the way they had briefed it to me, it seemed like there was room for them to give me a retest if they wanted to, but I needed them to want to, and they definitely didn't want to. So I was like, all right, well, let me talk to the CEO or first sergeant. And they did not want that to happen. Eventually got an interview with the CO who, was very, very professional. and ended up saying that he couldn't give me a retest, but he would try to get me an airborne slot. So he kind of like asked about me, and I told him about, um, or he asked where I wanted to go if I couldn't be in regiment. I was like, well, I'd like to be in the 82nd or 101st. He's like, okay, cool. Like that's what I would expect out of a dude who's wanted to be in regiment. I was like, yeah, Roger, sir. And he's like, why the 82nd? And I told him that my dad and uncle were there, and he's like, oh, what battalion? And I told him, and he was like, oh, which is 2505, and he was a commander in 1505, so our sister battalion in the 505 regiment. And so he was like, yeah, that's super cool. I'm going to try to help you out, talk to the orders guy, and see what we can do. So yeah, eventually got airborne orders. Went to airborne school, very normal airborne experience, and then yeah, I went to the 82nd, and now at BCO 2505.
How would you sum up your airborne experience? Was it kind of like a shit show or fun? Like, how was it?
No, it wasn't bad. I enjoyed it. I like jumping a lot, and you get to jump 5 times in 3 days, which is more than you'll ever do after that. So I quite liked it. There, it's a trade-off school, so they're gonna have a lot of stupid stuff as far as snivel gear, no talking or chewing gum or eating in the pack shed, just things like that, which are annoyances. But again, like OSUT, they do a pretty good job of getting people good enough at jumping out of airplanes in a short period of time. Honestly, I think it could be an even shorter school than it is, just 3 weeks long right now. And I think they could have a class where you literally learn in 3 days. It's so easy in my mind. But yeah, so finished airborne school and got up to Bragg and been there ever since.
Yeah, that's what most people say. They're like, you know what? Airborne could be shortened. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Just as long as you know how to PLF, and then after that, let gravity do its work. You know what I
yeah,
mean? But
absolutely.
cool. So you get through airborne school. You're able to, get to the unit that you want to get to, which is the 82nd. So
Mhm.
where does Ranger School come into play? Because I mean, that kind of happened pretty fast, in my opinion. So you get to your unit, and then Ranger School kind of came.
Right. Unfortunately, it wasn't as quick as I wanted it to be because shortly after I got into the unit, I went on like 2 days after I got to my unit, I went on block leave because it was around Christmas. Came back, did division and brigade level in processing, and then we shortly thereafter got deployed. So I was in Poland for I think 5 months. Tried to do a like an RPFT at the battalion level. So I did it with my company. I did really well on the RPFT then, and then like ran a 34-minute 5 mile, which was at the time my best. So I was feeling really good, like push ups, sit ups, chin ups, solid. And then we had to do it at the battalion level, and I got a grader who did not like my push up form again. I mean, there is something wrong with my push up form, evidently, if I failed twice. This time, not in a very like serious environment. It was just a random tab in our battalion grading me, and maybe he was a tab protector. I don't know, but he failed me, and so I was out of the running to leave early to go back to Ranger School. Turned out nobody got to leave early because there were manning issues across the battalion, which I think was pretty stupid. Like if you have young infantrymen that want to go to Ranger School, you should move, the freaking Coliseum to get them there. But yeah, none of us left, so got back from the Poland deployment, and it was the first weekend in July of 2021, or excuse me, 2022. And then I tried to get my paperwork done in time to go to the very next cert class. Unfortunately, wasn't able to get my physical schedule because they were doing reverse SRP stuff. Um, and there were no brigade doctors to see me. And so I had to wait another month, got my physical, got my paperwork in order, and then went to the very next cert class. And then did that, went to Ranger School, and like we talked about already, I recycled Florida. But yeah, I think all in all, it was just about a year after I got to my unit, I graduated Ranger School, almost to the day.
So before Ranger School, you have to attend Rap Week. So what's the purpose of Rap Week, and what does it consist of?
Yeah, I think you might be confusing Rap Week with CERT. So CERT is like the pre-ranger course that you go to, and
Okay.
that's a division level course that you go to that kind of is a gauge of whether you're ready for Ranger School. So there's a Rap Week. The very first week of Ranger School is Rap Week, and that's a bunch of gated events where you got land nav, the RPFT. the 12-mile ruck, the CWSA, and RTTs, so Ranger Technical Tasks, I think it's called. And you do all of that during CERT as well, because they want to make sure that you pass these gated events in CERT before they spend money on sending a dude down to Fort Benning. But yeah, Rap Week, you do both at CERT and then for real at Ranger School. And it's just those 5 events that I just listed. And I actually quite enjoyed Rap Week because it is a pretty competitive environment. You're going from a huge class of 300 and something, I think we had, to a much smaller class very quickly because people fail all those events to varying degrees. Like RPFT is probably the biggest one that weeds people out, but then RTTs are getting a lot of dudes. 12-mile ruck gets a handful, CVSA gets a handful. So yeah, I kind of like Rap Week actually.
And I think you had put it to me one time. You're like, you had to make a business decision. You're like, hey, like I could get a good score in this, but I chose
Oh
not
yeah, yeah.
to. What was that about?
So RPFT, for example, I can run like a decently fast 5 mile, but there's no benefit of running a 5 mile any faster than 39:59. Like I think I ran mine in 37 something, but there honestly, like I wish I would have ran it slower because you'd have a little bit more in the tank the rest of Rap Week. And it might be like, let's say you get a little knock on your leg and during the 12-mile ruck, you're just that little bit more attrited and tired because you went all out during the RPFT and land nav and all these other events. So yeah, like during the 5 mile run, I'm just like, I'm going to take it easy and post to a certain extent. So yeah, that's the business decision that people probably should make more often. And some people might be thinking, well, if you get below a certain time, you get a major plus, but those basically are irrelevant. The only thing that matters are major minuses and not accumulating those. Yeah, they do cancel out major minuses, but I got a couple major pluses, and they weren't the difference between me, passing the course or not. You just keep your head down, don't do the bare minimum, but also like be smart about it, make that business decision.
Got you.
Um, yeah.
So I believe there's Derby phase, Mountain phase, Swamp phase, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. So let's go through each one, just kind of giving your summary of it, what the phase is, and what it will consist of, and of
Uh-huh.
course, just overall what your experience was in that phase. So let's
Sure.
start
So,
with Derby phase.
yeah, Derby phase, the first one right after Rock Week, you go. We actually jumped into Derby phase, so you use the same airfield and drop zone that you do in Airborne School if you're jumping into Derby, and then you get bussed out to actual Camp Derby. You don't land on a DZ that they have out there or anything. So did that. Basically, at Derby, what you're doing is learning patrols. Now at the platoon level, when I went through, we were doing squads, or 2 companies were doing squads. Seco was doing platoons. Now it's just platoons. But you're learning how to do basic platoon level battle drills. You're working on the planning process, but it's done in a very methodical manner. Whereas as we'll get to mountains in Florida, you have a little bit more of an ability to use common sense and skip steps of the process. In Derby, you're learning the 20 boards and you have to follow those 20 boards to a T. So the easiest example I have to describe that is there'll be a situation where you're coming up to your objective and you set in for a short hold and you want to go send out a leader's recon to recon an ORP site. And then you realize you pinpoint yourself and you're a lot closer to the objective than you previously thought. So in Florida, you'd just be like, okay, this is our ORP. All right, we took it by force. But in Derby, you have to be like, okay, this is our short hole. We're going to move, you know, X number of meters in either direction. So we're actually not closer to the objective, but you're really not benefiting yourself by making that new ORP. You should probably just stay there and get on with your leader's recon of the objective. But in Derby, you have to follow every single step. And like I said, it's methodical and it's good to know all the steps. It's good to know how to recon in a certain pattern. Like those are all good things and there's embedded knowledge within those, but it's not necessary. Um, so yeah, Darby was good for me. I passed 1 out of 2 patrols. I really the patrol that I failed, we got blackwalked, which means nobody got to go. I thought that was a really good patrol. Frankly, I thought it was a lot better than the patrol I got to go on. So I was surprised to hear that I was only 1 for 2 when I got my grade. But yeah, got to go forward to mountains. Mountain phase, it's the longest phase of Ranger School. It's the most physically demanding. You do some really cool stuff with rappelling and other mountain related stuff. Knots is one of those. And then you do patrolling at a slightly higher level than Darby. And that was the first time we had done platoon operations. Unfortunately for us, my Darby squad was rolled into a Seco Darby platoon, and they had SOPs that frankly weren't well defined. And we kind of had a hard time adjusting to those and assimilating ourselves into their platoon. But it ended up being fine. We had a 100% go rate on patrols. I actually didn't get my go until day 10. I was in leadership. I'd failed my previous looks. I had 2 looks before that. One was a squad leader look, and another was a weasel look. And I mean, you'll hear people say this all the time, but you're surprised by the goes that you get and the no goes that you get. I got a no go on a weasel look that I thought went super well, and the rest of my squad thought went really well. And then I ended up getting a go on a look day 10 that everybody was super tired and less motivated than they probably should have been. But it's just weird, man. It's weird. But mountains, I really like mountains. It's very beautiful. I was there in the fall, and Dahlonega, Georgia was very, very pretty. It was cold some of those nights. Some of those late objectives that we hit, it was just bitterly cold because they weren't letting us wear civil gear at the time. That was pretty rough. But mountains was probably my second favorite phase. And then on to Florida, my favorite phase. You do, during that first week that you're down there, you do what's called a covert gap crossing. You do covert gap crossing training, and then you actually do it in FTX as well. But you make a 1 rope bridge across a bank to another bank using a tree and 1 rope to secure a line where you like string your equipment across, and you go hand over hand, not hand over hand, but hand to hand as you make your way across the little river. So that's something unique about Florida phase. You don't do that in either of the other phases. And then that's where patrolling is at the highest level, where you're using the common sense element of patrolling more than the other 2 phases, and it's the most realistic. Obviously, Ranger School is not very realistic. You're using blanks. You're a very attrited force in the sense that you have very little sleep, very little food, and you're definitely not operating at max capacity at that point. And by and large, in the recent conflicts that we've been in as an army, you're probably not going to be in as bad of a state as you are in Ranger School for sure. But it is the most realistic that you get as far as making decisions on the fly and audibling a lot. And I really enjoyed it for that reason. I did recycle Florida, as I mentioned already. I think it was good for me. I had the same grader both times, my first Florida phase. I thought that was unfortunate in and of itself. You shouldn't have the same grader both times, but I did, unfortunately. And he was an 82nd guy, actually, and he probably knew I was an 82nd guy, but he didn't care at all. It didn't help me with my grade for sure. And he just knocked me for not being vocal enough, which, if anybody is watching this knows me, is kind of an absurd thing to say. I'm probably the most vocal person, vocal to a fault. And that was one of his main critiques. And I know I did stuff, that was bad, but I don't think it was, no-go worthy. Anyways, recycle that. Was humbled quite a bit during that recycle period, but I took it pretty well, I think, and just focused on the next phase. And I thought ACO cadre, which is my second Florida's cadre, I thought they were really, really good. And I was probably paying more attention and was better rested than my BCO Florida. And they did a really good job. I was a lot more prepared and got my go on day 2 of patrols as a squad leader. And then I ended up having a bonus patrol on day 9 as a platoon leader, which I really enjoyed. I was the planning platoon leader and had obviously never been in that situation before as a lower enlisted guy in the Army. But I really enjoyed being the PL. Almost everybody on that patrol got a go. And yeah, it was a blast. I had a really good time. So again, Florida favorite phase. That second Florida especially was by far my favorite phase. Had a good time. And the platoon did a really good job. We had a very high go rate. And I think esprit de corps, if there is such a thing in a Ranger platoon, was quite high. So it was a good time to be around those dudes.
Got you. Any gems you could provide to future students that'll help them, whether it's something that'll save them time in certain aspects, how to plan, proper ruck packing, Just anything like that that you can give them.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to pack your ruck that'll make you comfortable, but something that's been said ad infinitum is pack high and tight, get that weight as high up in the ruck as it can be and as close to your back as possible. So that would help, I guess, but it's still going to be incredibly uncomfortable when you're on those, 10 click movements with a 90-pound ruck through,
Yes.
harsh terrain and mountains. Um, the biggest thing is dispositionally. That's the biggest difference between a successful Ranger student and an unsuccessful one. I think now somebody like I just went to Ranger school. I'm not an RI who's seen tons of classes, so it might smack of sanctimony that I'm saying, oh, this is the big difference between Ranger students. But from my experience, I'd say disposition plays a critical role in your success in a squad and then platoon success. And if there are rifts interpersonally within a squad, that can make for a terrible experience. But my platoons and my squad in particular, were always pretty close knit. And not to toot my own horn, but I think I did a decent job of keeping things pretty light and fun for the rest of the guys. Like I'd try to crack jokes and keep some levity to the situation. I think that's pretty important. Um, and then not only like being a funny guy, keeping things light, but also being a good dude, digging your fighting position, assigning sectors of fire if you're a team leader, doing the right thing. And our eyes will harp on this all the time. If you treat it like it's real, you're going to be a successful student, and that's very true. If you are treating it real, assigning sectors of fire, digging in, that's going to give you a go almost immediately. If you're just doing the right thing, because you won't get a go because you're assigning hasty sectors of fire. But if you're doing all the little things, you're probably doing the big things correctly too. Because if you have that, uh, if you're concerned about the most minute things, you're probably going to do well on the big things. Um, yeah. So that's my advice. Just be a good dude. Put out for your boys that are in your squad. Like this is the biggest moment in their Army career, probably, especially if they're an eye bullet guy or a lower enlisted, super young green guy like myself when I was going through, and still am. It's like this is the biggest moment that like when I was being looked at in Florida, that was the biggest moment of my young Army career. And I had some fantastic squad mates that were putting out for me, dude. And I thanked them in the moment for it, and I still thank them. So being a good dude, doing the right thing, and keeping things light and keeping things funny. Those are the 2 or 3 biggest things.
Okay. Let's get into your time at the 82nd now, and just kind of what you've done and what you've of course experienced so far. So I'd first like to ask, with having your tab, were you treated any differently? Like people had more respect, or they gave you more responsibility? Like, oh, he knows everything now.
Yeah, kind of both things. You are treated differently for sure because you've shown that you're willing to do something that a lot of people don't want to do to better not only yourself but your unit. So you come back as a Ranger tab leader. Before I went there, I had done basically nothing. Yes, I'd been part of a training workup, but that's not much, dude. Especially if you're a saw gunner like I was. I was an RTO and then a saw gunner. That's not enough to you're not really an asset at that point. You go to Ranger school, you're able to be a team leader, a squad leader, a platoon sergeant, a platoon leader. You have your aperture for understanding things is a lot wider at that point because you've seen much more and you've been in a different position. So I would say coming back, a lot is expected of you, and you are going to have more responsibility thrown your way. So as soon as I got back, I was a team leader, and then shortly thereafter promoted, went to a board, very easy board if you have your Ranger tab, and then on to BLC. So yeah, lots expected of you, but you've been given all the tools to be a very successful person at that point.
Okay. And you, like you said, you get more responsibility. You had time as a team leader and as a squad leader. How do you compare the two in terms of? Oh, am I correct on that?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
I'll just make sure you kind of give me that look, like, oh no, no. Okay.
well,
Anyways,
it's kind of funny. So the thing is, here, finish your question, and then I'll remember that point.
yeah, I was just saying, how do the two compare in terms of responsibility and task?
Yeah. So I was only made a squad leader because our manning is pretty low right now. And then my squad leader went to Ranger School. So in a perfect world, I would just be a team leader right now as an E5. I would just be a team leader. But because we had manning issues and my squad leader was gone at CERT and then Ranger School during our workup, I was a squad leader for our CTE, which is a brigade level thing that we do at Bragg, and then a squad leader for JRTC. And to contrast the two roles, a team leader, you're doing those direct to Joe level tasks, like you're assigning direct fire, direct fire control measures during like a battle drill. If you're in a patrol base, you're assigning sectors of fire. You're getting round counts for your squad leader to pass up to the PL or PSG, depending on how you do that. You're doing everything that is tangential to the Joes, so like touching the Joes, right? Speaking of touching, like you're going up to them, you're blood sweeping them after an engagement, like you're doing all those little things. Whereas a squad leader is behind the line, the team leader is on the line. Like the best way of kind of picturing it is the team leader is on the line as they bound. The
That's
squad
called
leader,
pace, right? When you go and check up on your guys, right? Is
so
it
a pace plan
no pace,
is
not a
like,
pace plan. Yeah.
yeah. So you're thinking of lace. So it's
Lace. There
liquid
you go. Yeah,
ignitions.
lace, lace,
Yeah.
lace.
So that's lace, and then pace is something else.
Okay.
Um,
I'll just make sure.
yeah. No, yeah, good memory, good memory. Um, so yeah, squad leaders are set behind the line and they're directing, they're moving the team leaders, and the team leaders are controlling their fire teams. But the squad leader has an important role to play in the planning process, which I really enjoyed being a part of at JRTC to a small degree. Um, but yeah, it's that's the major difference is that team leaders are, yes, receiving commands and information from the squad leader. They're the primary actors in that team, and the success of the team is dependent on how they lead it. Squad leader moving those pieces, but he's really putting a lot of faith in those team leaders to do the right thing. And then the squad leader also is talking to the PL a lot. In my platoon, like the squad leaders in the PL do a lot of the planning. Paragraphs 1, 3, like those are incredibly important. And the squad leader has in a perfect world, like it's kind of different fragos in the field, but if you're doing the planning process, the squad leader should be intimately they should have an intimate understanding of the planning process so that they can help the PL out. And that's kind of what we did before JRTC, and at JRTC it comes a little bit different in the field when there's a lot of fragos hitting you, but I really enjoyed that aspect of being a squad leader. Yeah.
What do you like and dislike about both team leader, squad leader?
um Being a team leader, especially over a 10, 11 day FTX, can get pretty redundant, or you can seem like what you're doing is redundant, like you're getting a constant SI check. And like sometimes the PSG will be like, hey, let's get an SI check. Sometimes your squad leader, 30 minutes before that will be like, hey, let's get an SI check. But you're just doing SI checks all the time. You're doing things that are certain kind of monotonous. You're getting round counts. You're getting quarts of water. You're going to the river to fill those quarts of water with a hand pump. It's like it's not the prettiest work of all time. So although it's important work, it can get grating after a while. So that, I guess that's a con of being a team leader. It's just a lot of work. A pro being a team leader is that you're that guy with the team as they're bounding. That's so cool. You're the last. That's the last level of leadership where you're a part of the tip of the spear, basically. And then, like I said, the next level up from that's the squad leader who's behind the squad as they bound. So that's the pro, is that you're still a part of the team and you're still a shooter. Pro of squad leader, the biggest pro for me that I enjoyed. Again, I just want to qualify the statement of like me being a squad leader. I was only a squad leader because we had really bad manning. And I kind of lucked out, but I really enjoyed doing it. And that was being a part of the planning process and talking with the PL. We actually, my PL and I went to CERT together, so the 80 seconds pre-Ranger program. So we actually knew each other pretty well before it became our PL. So like working with him, coming up with the plan, that's the pro. And then the con, I suppose, not being a part of the team as it bounds. Like you have to hold yourself back a little bit. You can't be as much of a dog as team leaders can be. So you have to kind of control yourself in those situations. So
Yeah.
that'd be my pro
Okay.
and con for both.
Got you. And in terms of like training exercises, is JRTC the only one you've been on so far?
That was the first time I've been in JRTC. I've been a part of a good number of team, squad, platoon level live fires,
Okay.
and now squad sticks is platoon X evals, which are basically platoon sticks. Um, so I'd say I've been, and then brigade level CTE. So I've been a part of 2 brigade training events, all those live fires and sticks events, and then Ranger School probably being the biggest training event of them all because it's 62 days of training essentially. So yeah.
Got you. So
So
just
yeah,
kind of
I haven't done a lot. You're right. Like I haven't done a lot as far as training events go. Because the 82nd works on this basically 18-month cycle. So you're only going to be on the training cycle around 6 out of 18 months. You're doing training throughout that entire 18 months, but your training focus is for 6 of those 18. So I've only gone through that cycle one time. So I haven't had a super robust um, workup besides this one that I just did.
okay. And how would you describe your army experience thus far? How would you describe it, and would you say it was all well worth it?
Yeah, 100% worth it. There are times where you're thinking things could be going so much better if it were for XYZ, like the commander, 3 echelons above you being a lot better. Like, what is he thinking? Like, these things run through your mind, especially in Garrison, man. Like, why am I doing this, dude? This is, to use the same word, monotonous. Like, I'm cleaning the same bathroom that only 3 people have used this entire day. I'm cleaning it again. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I picking up gum off the sidewalk or hedging these bushes, edging these Bermuda grass off of the sidewalk? Like it's pretty annoying at times, but yeah, it's all worth it if you think about um, like defense of our country, winning the nation's land wars. That's an incredible responsibility. Um, so yeah, it's worth it, even if you have to deal with some stupid stuff along the way.
Okay. And just kind of getting into the what now. You mentioned you either want to commission or most likely you want to get out. As of now, what are you leaning towards?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably 50-50 right now. Um, if I do stay in, I'll commission almost certainly. It's hard to assign probabilities to it precisely, but a lot can change in 2+ years from now. But I would say commission as an 11 alpha would be one of them, probably through the green to gold program. So I get my master's. Um, that's course of action one, I guess. And then second course of action would be to get out, get a master's degree using the GI Bill, and probably would be getting the master's degree in the same thing, whether I go green to gold, stay in the army, or get out. I just really like international studies type stuff, security studies, things. I love reading about um, our national defense, military writ large. So, in diplomacy, like how all that, the interplay, geopolitics, whatever you want to call it, geoeconomics, rather. The interplay of like economics, which is because I love finance, so the economic portion of it, plus the power politics, plus the diplomacy. Um, I love all that stuff. So getting a degree and eventually getting a job, being able to read, think about those things constantly would be really cool. But I also love the army and could definitely see myself staying here for a long time.
So if you do commission, no redemption at RAS for RAS 2?
I mean, if I commission, I would do PL time in the big army, and then there would be an opportunity for me to go to RAS too. And yeah, I mean, I would love to do it again. I think it's a great organization, and I could, I'd love to be there. Yeah.
I hope you do, man. Fun fact, not to take too much time on it, but Rocha actually just made it.
Yeah, dude, I saw that, man. I saw that. He actually posted a picture on Snapchat with one of the FOs from my battalion.
Really? He posted a
So,
picture?
yeah, he posted a picture. He
What?
had like blacked out my buddy's eyes, but he has a gigantic cantaloupe of a head, watermelon of a head, and dude's head is massive and he's bald. And I was like, that's my buddy. And sure enough, it was. And then he's actually subsequent to him passing, he went to JRTC with us, which I thought was pretty sad that he had to go to JRTC. And then I see him in the DFAC all the time. So I talk to him weekly for
Talking
sure.
about Rocha, or are you talking about?
No, just the buddy that he met at
Oh,
Rasp.
okay. I was about to say, I was like, what? Okay, that's kind of weird. Like Rocha shouldn't be around there.
He's not here. Not here.
That was surprising to me, man. I was very astonished. I was like, wow, like
He was always
Rocha.
really driven. He was running in his own time.
Yeah, bro.
Great runner, like sub 30
Super.
minute 5 mile stud.
He ran a 28-minute 5 mile and completed the, what is it, the RFT or something like that in like 31 minutes. I forgot what it's called.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we did our 5 mile, he ran it in under 30 minutes.
Dude, yeah.
So
Blazing.
pretty crazy, man. Great runner.
Yeah. Shout out to Roach, man. If you watch this, man, good luck, man. Hopefully you get that tab soon, because right now life probably sucks until
Yeah,
you get
for
that
sure.
tab.
For
But
sure.
that's it, brother, man. We covered everything, man. Is there any last things you want to kind of end it off with before I kind of give my conclusion to the whole episode?
Yeah, one thing, like I talked about earlier, the memory of my father is incredibly important to me. So if you think of it, have some time, just look him up, read a little bit about his life. Um, I'd love for more people to know about his story. That's all I got.
Cool, man. Shout out Hans Kurth, right?
Yeah. Hans.
Shout out Hans, man. Love you, man. Love you, man. Thank you for your service, dude. And we're all gonna have our end time eventually. So I know
For
you're
sure.
gonna see him eventually. But that concludes the episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching, or taking the time to watch. Curse come up, Curse story, super awesome. A lot of gems. Probably I can most likely see us doing another interview or doing a live, going probably more in depth in Ranger School. Different things like that. But please like, share, subscribe, guys, so that way we continue to push out these stories and I can continue to post these stories. These are incredible stories, document their journeys, and it's something that we can always look back on. So that's it, guys. And until then, we will see you next time, man.